Hello everyone, today we're diving into the fascinating story of Anne Boleyn. Anne was a queen in England, a long time ago. She was married to King Henry VIII. But here's the twist. Anne's life didn't end in a fairy tale. Instead, it ended with a lot of drama and mystery. Some people say she did bad things, but others aren't so sure. Our job is to explore the details and see what we can discover. So why is Anne Boleyn's story important? Well, she was a big part of history because her marriage to King Henry changed England forever. King Henry really wanted a son, and he thought Anne could give him one, so he did something huge. He changed England's religion. This was big. That's why her story still captures our imagination today. Now, let's look at some interesting pieces of Anne's story. First, Anne was accused of being unfaithful to the king. Imagine being blamed for something like that during such a serious time. Some people think she was guilty, but others believe she was just caught in a web of lies spun by her enemies. Secondly, Anne was accused of wanting to harm the king. But many historians today wonder if these accusations were made up by people who didn't like her. Some folks believe Anne was simply a victim of the king's changing moods and powerful people who wanted to see her fall. They say the evidence against her didn't prove she was guilty. But back then, things worked differently, and Anne found herself in a lot of trouble. However, not everyone agrees. Some historians think Anne may have played a role in her downfall by being too ambitious and making too many enemies. But isn't it interesting how one story can have so many different sides? Anne Boleyn's story connects to lots of other things, like how power and politics worked back then. It also shows how the lives of queens weren't always easy, even though they lived in castles and wore fancy clothes. Exploring her story helps us understand the complicated world of the past better. So, as we move forward, let's keep these ideas in mind. Was Anne really guilty of the things they said she did, or was she just in the wrong place at the wrong time? We'll uncover more clues as we continue this historical adventure. Hello, young historians. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of Anne Boleyn and her journey from being a queen to becoming someone who was accused of terrible things. Anne Boleyn was the second wife of King Henry VIII of England. At first, she was a queen, living a life filled with beautiful clothes, castles, and lots of important people. But then something happened, and she was accused of some very serious crimes. Being accused means that people said Anne did something wrong, even though we still aren't sure if she really did. This is important to our topic because it makes us wonder, was Anne Boleyn really guilty, or was something else going on? One example of why Anne was accused is because she couldn't have a son. Back then, people thought it was very important for kings to have sons who could become the next king. King Henry VIII wanted a son very much, and since Anne only had a daughter, some people say he decided to find a way to marry someone else. Another reason is that Anne had made some powerful enemies in the king's court. These people might have wanted her gone, so they spread rumors and bad stories about her. Opinions about Anne's guilt are different. Some historians think Anne was innocent and that the accusations were all made up so King Henry could marry again. Others believe there might be some truth to the claims. The tricky part is that it's difficult to find proof from so long ago. This story is like a big puzzle with missing pieces, and everyone has a different idea about what the picture really looks like. Some people say that the king's power and his desire for a son made it hard for Anne to have a fair chance. Others think Anne might have made mistakes that led to her downfall. Anne's story connects to other parts of our main topic by showing us how powerful people in the past could change someone's life completely. It makes us question how fair things were and what we can learn from it today. So, as we explore more about Anne Boleyn, let's keep our minds open and think about all the different reasons she went from being a queen to being accused. Who knows, maybe one day we'll solve the mystery of whether Anne Boleyn was really guilty or not. Hello, young historians. Today, we are diving into a fascinating mystery from history. Was Anne Boleyn really guilty? Anne Boleyn was the second wife of King Henry VIII of England. She was accused of some very serious things that led to her losing her head, literally. Now, let's explore the charges against Anne and see if they hold up. First, let's understand what these charges were all about. Anne was accused of committing crimes like treason, which is when someone acts against their own country, and adultery, which means being unfaithful to her husband, King Henry. These were very serious accusations back then. If you were found guilty of these crimes, it could mean losing your life. Why were these charges so important? Well, they led to Anne Boleyn's downfall and changed the course of English history. Anne's trial was a big deal because the king himself was involved. If Anne was guilty, then the future of England's royal family would be very different. Let's talk about some examples from the trial. Anne was accused of having secret romances with several men, including her own brother, which sounds shocking. The people who accused Anne said they had seen her behave in inappropriate ways. It's important to know that back then, proving someone's guilt was not as fair or as thorough as it is today. Some historians believe that these accusations could have been made up by people who wanted to see Anne out of the picture, so that King Henry could marry someone else. There are different opinions about the charges against Anne. Some believe she was innocent and that she became a victim of lies and jealous enemies at court. Others think she might have been guilty of a little flirtation, but nothing as serious as treason or adultery. This leads us to the controversies and challenges. Many historians argue that the evidence against Anne was not strong enough and her trial was unfair. Alternative viewpoints suggest that the charges might have been a way for King Henry to get rid of Anne because she couldn't give him a son. So, how does this connect to the whole story of Anne Boleyn? Whether she was guilty or not impacts how we view this chapter of history and the role of justice back in the 1500s. As we continue to explore, keep in mind how power and personal interests can influence decisions in history. Stay curious, and we'll uncover more exciting details about Anne Boleyn in our next chat. Hello everyone, today we're diving into the question, was Anne Boleyn really guilty? As a historian, I'm here to help you explore this mystery by looking at the evidence. But wait, what is evidence? Simply put, evidence is information that helps us decide if something is true or not. Think of it like clues for a detective solving a case. In the story of Anne Boleyn, we need to look at the different pieces of evidence to understand what really happened. Now, why is evidence so important in Anne Boleyn's story? Anne was the Queen of England in the 1500s, and she was accused of terrible things, like betraying her husband, King Henry VIII. These accusations led to her being executed. But was she really guilty? By looking at evidence, we can try to find out if the accusations were true or if there might have been other reasons for her downfall. Let's look at some examples of evidence from Anne's time. One piece of evidence is letters and documents from the court. These papers show what people were saying about Anne. Some letters claimed Anne had secret relationships with other men. But just because someone says something doesn't always mean it's true, right? We'll explore why these letters might not be as trustworthy as they seem. Another example of evidence is eyewitness accounts. Some people claimed they saw Anne doing bad things, but they might have had their own reasons for saying so, like wanting to please the king. There are different opinions about whether Anne was truly guilty. Some historians believe the evidence was twisted or made up because powerful people wanted Anne out of the way. On the other hand, some think there might have been a grain of truth in the accusations. This makes the evidence tricky to weigh and understand. The evidence also presents challenges and controversies. Back then, people did not have technology to double-check facts, and powerful people could easily influence what others believed. Today, historians need to be like detectives, carefully piecing together what might really have happened, and questioning if Anne received a fair trial. Exploring this evidence helps us connect to other parts of Anne Boleyn's story, like how power and politics played a big role in her fate. Was Anne Boleyn really guilty, or was she a victim of a dangerous game at court? By examining the evidence, we can better understand her story and the history surrounding it. Stay tuned as we continue to uncover more about this intriguing historical mystery.